The next one is Orlando.
It's no secret, the Orlando area is incredibly urbanized. And what's happened is we are, for all intents and purposes, with a slight exception for some of the St. John's area, we are getting the majority of Orlando's runoff. Now that's not Orlando's fault. They grew fast without a lot of thought, just like the rest of our country, frankly. But we are working with people in Orlando and the rest of Central Florida to start teaching them about taking care of their own runoff. Very excited about some of the eco-art installations that show how water can be recycled. You know, rain barrels. I know that sounds so simplistic, but can you imagine what would happen if at every household in Orlando there was a rain barrel? I mean, it would help so many things. We're running out of drinking water in this state. They're projecting us to not have enough water for all of us that are moving in and all of us that currently live here by the year 2035. Another thing that is a concern for us is the fact that while we're flushing, last year during the height of the discharges, 3.6 billion gallons a day of fresh water, albeit polluted, we'll handle that as we go, but we're flushing all this to time. We are throwing away a precious resource in the state of Florida. And it's a resource we desperately need all over the state, as anybody who's been through a drought here can attest to.
E. Everyone says, why is it E? Couldn't you use something else? Well, E is for the water flowway south that everybody knows we need and want. Where's the water going to go? I don't know.
Not east.
Not east. The west needs a little bit because they have to keep their salinity level. There's several other options going south. There's research being done right now. When it comes out, we'll figure out where it goes. But water has to go south. Everyone agrees with that. We agree with that. We don't care how it goes there. As soon as they figure it out, it'll go there.
I disagree. Hold on. We do actually care how it goes there. Because there are people, and there are animals, and there are ecosystems, and we want it clean. We realize that it has to be that 10 parts per billion. I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to take that away from anyone. But we also realize that there are times of the year that the Everglades needs more water to the south. And it's being denied because we're throwing it all away off the East Coast and a little bit off the West Coast as well. So, yeah, we do care when it goes south, but we have to figure that out and we have to work together to do it.
Should have jumped ahead.
That's how I roll.
I'd like to make one slight alteration there. We get 75% of the flow on the West Coast, you get 25%. But your ecosystem lays out differently, so obviously you suffer horribly.
Well, and you guys need it, whereas we need it now.
It's not like you get a little bit.
So.
Oh, no, we need it.
No, you get twice as much. We understand that.
Absolutely.
But you need a little, we need none.
Right, absolutely.
All right, we got it. All right, the Z. It could be an R, but Z is for returning the oxbows to slow the water down. If we're going to remove some water from Orlando coming down here, then we have the opportunity to slow the water, let it get clean, hold a little bit more there, and move it south. The important thing is, if you clean the water at the source, when it gets to the lake, you don't have to worry about it. At the southern end of the lake, the water quality is about 200 parts per billion. We need it to be 10 parts per billion to go past the lake. It would be easier to start cleaning it at the beginning, so as it came down, it was easier to clean. That would make everybody's problem easier. Thank you. So what do we suggest?
We suggest we clean it. We suggest we store it. We suggest that we figure out a way to send it south clean. But one thing I want to mention is something I'm fond of saying, because everyone likes to say that we have to send it all south like it used to flow naturally. Well, you know, it didn't actually all flow south. A lot of it stayed in the Kissimmee Valley with all those oxbows. When we had a heavy wet year during the, years prior to them straightening the Kissimmee River, it would sit, and the water would sit between the oxbows. It would become more sheet flow or swampland or whatever your term is. But as it sat there, it evaporated off, and it also percolated down, and it recharged our aquifer. So what we're actually saying is, yes, let's work at putting some things back to normal, back to natural, as much as we possibly can. Thank you very much.
Now, a lot of people have said, well, you're a distraction from what we need to do. We need to be sending the water south. And you're taking money away from other projects that we need money for. This is the money that's been rolling in this year. It's not a small amount of money. We spent many, many hours in Tallahassee speaking with probably 60% of the politicians there. People say, well, you know, 703 went away. How do you think that happened? 2 minutes, I got it. One Florida Foundation has spent a lot of time talking with everyone we could, trying to give them the pulse of what everyone thinks in this area. We went from senator to senator, representative to representative. Larry Lee stood up and was the only one that voted against 703 in committee. And he did it time and time again. Eventually, it did not go forward. The senators told us, don't worry about it, it'll be too expensive, they'll stop. And certainly it did. I want to thank Karen Dwyer right there, because this is our list of state concerns, and I'm able to take that off of our list right now. We're going to watch them, but we've taken it off the list. That's a very little line I've drawn through it. We have a springs issue. We have deep well injections. This is what the state could look like with intrusions like before the end of this century. You see, Florida's all blue. And what happens is when the water flows, when it gets there, it goes to the Everglades. Our fear is that people talk about that the constraint that we have is that water quality number. That's not the constraint. We have to get it clean before we get there. We have a lot of answers now. It would be a statewide water policy. How would we pay for it? Amendment 1 and 2, and our state budget would do that. Persistence over resistance. That's our concern. That's our motto. Those are our projects again.
There it is.
Thank you very much.
Ray, Judah, and John Scott. Let's have an introduction by Danica.
Okay, so West Coast Guardians of the Water, John W. Scott, co-founder of Clean Water Initiative of Florida, and Ray Judah, former Lee County Commissioner and current coordinator of Florida Coastal and Ocean Coalition.
Good morning, sorry. Or afternoon, yes. I would first like to thank Mr. Houston Cypress and Love the Everglades movement for planning this landmark event. And I would like to also thank the other speakers here today. It's my humble pleasure to share the stage with you. Thank you. My name is John W. Scott. Some of you might know me better by my Facebook handle, which is Green Guy. And I'd like to begin by telling you briefly why I'm here today. I'm a native Floridian, born and raised in Miami, and I've lived in Florida my whole life, calling Fort Myers my home since 1979. And I've witnessed drastic changes in all facets of this state, and I'm here to tell you, as far as the environment is concerned, they are not for the better. Shortly after the Orlando Clean Water Summit in November of 2013, my wife and I, Ruth, founded the Clean Water Initiative of Florida, an advocacy group dedicated to preserving Florida's natural resources through public education, awareness, and policy change. Although we've been environmentalists for all of our adult lives, we decided it was time to get involved and really do something. Sorry about that. We've learned in a very short time, working with and learning from some incredible folks from all over the state of Florida, that our waterways and everything and everyone that relies upon them are under attack. In fact, it's an overwhelming assault that never seems to stop. The images on the screen will tell you everything that you need to know, so you can just watch those while I'm talking, and that kind of tells the story while I'm telling you another part of the story. The Caloosahatchee on the river on the west coast, and the St. Lucie River and the Indian River Lagoon on the east coast have been absolutely devastated by relentless polluted discharges from Lake Okeechobee, up to 6 billion gallons per day at the peak of the 2013 rainy season. This has resulted in historic mortality events for all types of marine life, including manatees, dolphins, sea turtles, pelicans, fish, and oyster beds. In 2013, we set a record. Not a good one, mind you. 830 manatee deaths in the state of Florida, the most since record keeping began. And in the Indian River Lagoon on the east coast alone, 80 dolphins died in a mortality event over there. Most certainly from the algae blooms and deadly toxins created by the aforementioned runoff from Lake Okeechobee. This is not the way nature intended it to be. In fact, it wasn't this way until recently, when some developers and agriculture politicians and the Army Corps of Engineers decided that other interests were more important than the welfare and natural flow of the Everglades and Lake Okeechobee. Our ecosystems are being laid to waste, yet somehow politics and profits have jumped ahead of our natural resources as top priorities. This is shameful, and we all know that it's shameful, yet voters still elect many of the same folks whose goal is to maintain the status quo. You know the status quo. Peripheral, fringe solutions that nibble at the edges of the problem instead of getting to the heart of it. And we've had more than one well-studied, analyzed proposal to send the water south for decades. Yet after all these years, we're still getting the same old lip service about sending the water south with nothing to show for it. Now, I've spoken to several local and state politicians, and when I press them about showing leadership on sending the water south, what do I get? Predictable canned responses. Like, that's a long-term project, not a short-term project. Or, I'm not sure about the feasibility of it. Let's study it more. Those responses work great as sound bites to deflect blame or to pacify inquiring minds, but they never fix the problem. Billions of dollars in proposed solutions are on the table that won't come close to resolving the Lake discharge problems, and they'll be applauded, hailed as true leadership. But what happens if you try to implement a solution that will completely resolve the problem? Crickets. Politicization, vilification, misinformation, procrastination. Polluters and special interests always get their way because they always have more money. The agricultural industry spent billions of dollars on campaign contributions and lobbyists over the years, resulting in absolute power at all levels of government. So much power, in fact, that no agency or bought politician dares step out of line and act against those interests, no matter what the effect on our natural resources may be. Even the smallest changes seem to be nearly impossible to achieve. Public safety just no longer trumps profit. Now, I have nothing against responsible agriculture, which means being good stewards to our natural resources. But if anyone in this room dumps toxic waste into our waterways, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to get fined or thrown in jail or both, right? Am I correct? Right. The agriculture industry, however, can backpump billions of gallons of polluted runoff into Lake O annually with no penalty. What we've witnessed in this state for decades is anything but responsible. In fact, it's criminal. Privatized profits and socialized cleanup is not by any measure fair to our natural resources or the taxpayers of the state. And I think it's worth noting that we have a $65+ billion per year tourism industry, as I'm sure everyone in this room knows. And the only thing required to make sure that it keeps thriving is to preserve our natural resources. That's not too difficult. It's not rocket science, as somebody said earlier. We must keep relentless pressure on local, state, and federal officials and agencies. We must demand that they do their job and protect our natural resources as outlined in the state constitution. Come election time, we must remember, if you want these issues to be addressed properly, you must elect people who will do so. Thanks to each and every one of you for being here today. Together we can make a difference. And now that I've touched on the dire problems facing Florida's waterways, My partner in this presentation will present the solutions, real solutions to these problems. I'm honored to introduce a man that I've admired for many years and proud to call my friend, have learned so very much from, and am thrilled to be working with this important cause. He served for 24 years on the Lee County Board of County Commissioners and is currently the coordinator for Florida Coastal and Ocean Coalition. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a loud welcome for Ray Judah.
Flipping up to the, Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, we're good. First of all, this is not an enviable, excuse me. If you could just stay up here and operate that for me, thank you. Not an enviable task to be standing up here between your growling stomachs and lunch. But I appreciate your patience. I want to certainly thank Mr. Cypress and the Miccosukee tribe for the opportunity today and for all of you to be here. I think we can all learn from each other. You know, the previous presenter mentioned that this is not rocket science to restore the Everglades, and I couldn't agree more. And if you could please go to the next slide. I think this visual image really helps to explain matters, because if you look at Lake Okeechobee as literally in medical terms, the liquid heart of the South Florida ecosystem, you recognize that entire vast expanse of the Everglades agriculture area directly south of the lake, the 700,000 acres of primarily sugarcane fields, severs that artery, or severs that hydrological connection that once existed between the lake and the Everglades. But it also has caused a number of other problems, and that is that much of this water that used to flow to the south is now redirected, and has been redirected for several decades, to the Caloosahatchee on the west coast and the St. Lucie on the east coast. I did want to point out while I have this slide here, because a lot of the elected officials, the South Florida Water Management District, the Corps of Engineers, have tried to work out ways in which to enhance and restore the Lake Okeechobee watershed, to restore the Everglades and to prevent the adverse impacts to our coastal estuaries, Indian River Lagoon and also Estero Bay and Pine Island Sound on the west coast. And if you look at that slide there, you can see where the Tamiami Trail is and Alligator Alley. You can certainly see the water conservation area 3A and 3B. You see that levee that separates 3A and 3B. Well, when you think about the Central Everglades Planning Project, which the Everglades Foundation is strongly supporting funding for, about $2.6 billion, there's a lot of good components to that project. And of course, they're fighting to try to get funding either through the Water Resource Reform and Development Act or find other ways to obtain those dollars from the state or the federal government. But it's a noble pursuit. And certainly some of the positive components are to remove some of that levee between the water conservation area 3A and 3B to allow for water to flow to the south. Also a seepage barrier that would prevent flooding of the development that you see to the east of the water conservation areas. And then of course, as you had heard earlier, some $90 million that the state is contributing in joint partnership with the Department of Interior to build some 2.6 miles of bridging on the Tamiami Trail, again, to allow for the water to flow to the south. So those are strong attributes of the Central Everglades Planning Project, but that is not in any way the answer to restoring the Everglades and again protecting our coastal estuaries on the South Florida. And I say that because if you talk to the Corps of Engineers, they will tell you the numbers. And this is what's important, is you have to look at the water budget for the Lake Okeechobee watershed. Only 68 billion gallons of water, or roughly 210,000 acre-feet of water from the lake, will end up, through the Central Everglades Planning Project, flow to the south. If you think that's a lot of water, think again, because last year alone, over 500 billion gallons of water was in the lake, most of that being sent to the west and to the east. If you could please, okay. This to me is a picture that's better than 1,000 words, because what you have here is a photograph that overlays an aerial of the topography there that was done by the South Florida Water Management District. This was taken last year. As you know, we were just inundated with heavy rains. And what we have here is the teal or turquoise that you see color in the Lake Okeechobee, over to the west, Pine Island Sound, Sanibel, up there in the Indian River Lagoon to the east, and then also the water conservation areas. And you notice that one area between the lake and the water conservation areas is high and dry. Well, that's the Everglades agricultural area. The reason that's high and dry is because what I think is the 11th commandment for the South Florida Water Management District. Thou shalt keep the water at 18 to 24 inches below ground to provide optimum growing conditions for the sugarcane industry. and to the detriment of all the other areas within the ecosystem. So in other words, no matter what the seasonal fluctuation, that water is going to go elsewhere, primarily to the coastal estuaries on the west and east coast of South Florida. Therein lies the problem, because of a water resource mandate by the South Florida Water Management District to provide for optimum growing conditions for the sugar industry to the detriment of the entire ecosystem. If you could point to the next one. Now here again, if you look at the water budget, and it's a pretty busy slide, but I'm going to try to draw out some numbers here that you can see pretty easily. You see on the west coast there, S77 to 9,300 cubic feet per second. That equates to 6 billion gallons a day. And as you probably have read or heard, you've already seen today, that the C43 reservoir through the Water Resource Reform Development Act is to be built on the west coast in Henry County, where in which water is to be stored and to help alleviate the massive releases from Lake Okeechobee. And while that is one tool in the toolbox, what you need to understand is, if the C43 reservoir does ever at some time get built, it will store 170,000 acre-feet of water, or 55 billion gallons of water. And I just mentioned earlier, 500 billion gallons of water flowed from the lake, most of it to the west coast. So if 9,300 cubic feet per second equates to 6 billion gallons a day, how long will it take to fill up 55 billion gallons in a reservoir? Well, about 9 days. And we had 4 months of discharge from the lake to the coastal estuaries of 7,400 cubic feet per second, close to 5 billion gallons a day for 4 months. So that C43 reservoir will be a tool in the toolbox, but it'll only take care of about 10% of the runoff from the lake. And it does not have a water quality component, so you still have problems with nitrogen and phosphorus, creating adverse harm by causing harmful algae blooms, red tides, and fish kills. Within the lake itself, you can see the going over to the east coast there, to the St. Lucie, about 20% of the discharge, and about 400,000 acre feet. What people don't realize, though, is none of that lake water is going into the C44 reservoir. That's going to take agricultural drainage. So that's not alleviating the problem with the discharge from the lake. So the point I'm trying to make is, if you look at the water budget, we recognize that all these projects that our legislature and the district are looking at trying to put in place to basically help improve the watershed will have a minimal effect. And really what we need to look at is the next slide, where you can see a proposed flowway in the Everglades agricultural area. You all heard of Plan 6. Plan 6 is the fix. And to think or to try to act otherwise is foolhardy. Because what we absolutely need is, one, a spillway in the south end of the lake to provide for excessive releases of high water to protect the integrity of the dike and people's lives and people's property, instead of using the Caloosahatchee and St. Lucie as the relief valves. So first of all, provide that spillway, then have the state purchase the necessary 50,000 acres of land that will combine with the publicly owned land, so we'll have 100,000 acres of land in which we can actually provide enough land to store, treat, and convey the water, over 100,000 acres of land directly to the south, where we can protect and nurture the Everglades with the proper quantity and quality of water and alleviate the adverse impacts to the estuaries on the west and east coast of South Florida. So I would implore you, what we really need to pursue is give us this day our flowway and get on the page where in which we can finally provide an important improvement to this patient, the Everglades, by being able to provide that artery, that hydrologic connection from the lake to the Everglades. Thank you very much. I understand you have a question, Laura?
My question is, has Charlie Crist endorsed this plan?
Charlie Crist, as you know, worked out an agreement with U.S. Sugar to buy the entire 187,000 acres before he left office. Ultimately, the state acquired 26,000 acres, but that's all over by the Loxahatchee area, which is fine. They'll work as a stormwater treatment area. Will he support this flowway concept? He certainly supported it when he was governor. I certainly believe that if he is to be elected as governor again, that he will resurrect this idea to be able to provide a meaningful solution of a flowway south from the lake to the Everglades National Park. Thank you.
Also, if you'd like to know more about what Ray and I are doing in our organizations, you can look us up on Facebook, Clean Water Initiative of Florida and Florida Coastal and Ocean Coalition, and also on our websites, which are on there as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And you guys have a booth over in the next room, right? Good.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to make it very clear that this event is the Summer Symposium 2014 organized by the Love the Everglades movement. And I just want to make it very clear that the Miccosukee tribe is simply a sponsor. The Miccosukee tribe has nothing to do with any of the presentations here. They are not endorsing anything here. They are neutral as far as what you're hearing here. So I appreciate the fact that our presenters are thankful to the tribe, but we really deserve the credit. Give the credit where it's due. Love the Everglades movement. Thank you so much. Okay, so it's a buffet lunch. I kind of want to follow our tradition of having the elders come first, but feel free to serve yourself. There's 2 sides to the buffet. We have 1 hour for lunch, and then we'll be back here. I'm also going to be passing out release forms for those people that are reserved for the airboat ride at 4 o'clock. So I will find you. Enjoy your lunch. We'll be back in 1 hour.
best place we found was Key Biscayne.
About the Biscayne Bay, and I'm working on a little project. It's about halfway done, and it answers that question, what can I do? What can we do? And for those of us that live in Miami, everything we do directly affects the Biscayne Bay. And so I went around the city, went to different people and asked, why do they care? You know, what do they do for the Biscayne Bay? I talked to everyone from yoga instructors to Little Wayne's real estate agent to
Little Wayne's real estate agent.
And so here's the video.
40 years ago, there was a need to create Biscayne Bay water preserve. The act enabled the state, DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, to oversee the Biscayne Bay area. It gave them enforcement and protection powers within the Biscayne Bay area, which is now called the Biscayne Bay Water Preserve.
With my experience in real estate, the health of the bay drastically affects the value of real estate. People move here because they want to be on the water, they want it to be beautiful, the nice blue color it is, and the healthier the bay, the better the water condition is, and that directly affects how much people want to live on water.
My personal practice is actually stronger when I'm outside. When I actually feel the ground beneath me, I can actually hear the wind and the waves and be connected to that thing that's unifying us all. It's an incredible magnetism that you have when you're actually feeling the grass between your toes or even the water.
When I'm in my backyard gardening, I'm aware of how I'm conserving water, and I'm also aware of how I'm helping clean the water before it reaches the Biscayne Bay.
It doesn't take much. We can do things on very small spaces to plant gardens that help us restore, cleanse, and purify the water before it goes back out into the larger bodies of water. It's something that you look forward to doing. It's fun. You do it with your friends. It's a moment to get together.
Biscayne Bay is important for fisheries, it's important for sea level, natural break from hurricanes and storms and storm surge, and obviously it provides a great recreational atmosphere or scene for future kids.
As a student mother, when she was born, I wanted to be able to experience it. I wanted to be able to float in it and not have to worry about some weird object floating next to you. And you want that security because it's our natural resource. There's just a connectedness that you can't get anywhere else.
I really like coming out here because I feel energized, and it's also a very spiritual experience for me.
Saving the environment can be very, very pleasurable, and it's my favorite thing to do.
The next two events for the Biscayne Bay Water Preserves is October 5th at Darien Estate is a dinner and silent auction, and then on October 25th is a paddle out event out in Pelican Harbor Marina. Thank you.
Can I ask you?
All right, we're back. I hope you had a great lunch. Again, lunch was sponsored by the Miccosukee tribe, and the menu was selected and designed by a pretty special lady. I want to say thanks to my mom. She designed the menu. And make stay because we're going to close out the symposium with her short film. It's a perspective on Everglades restoration, a unique perspective, so make sure you stick around for that. The stars of the film will also be having an autograph session, so make sure you get a souvenir. Up next, Dr. Karen Dwyer holds 3 degrees from the University of Notre Dame, is a retired teacher by profession and activist by conscience. She's lived in Florida over 50 years and has been closely involved in the Fair Food Program, immigration reform, human rights work, the anti-nuclear movement, and climate justice. Her group, the Stone Crab Alliance, was formed in the 1970s when it helped to stop a nuclear power plant from being built in Bonita Springs. Currently, the group is working to stop the expansion of new oil drilling and fracking in Naples, Florida, and the Everglades. We present Dr. Karen Dwyer.
It's an honor to join so many clean water advocates. The Stone Crab Alliance, along with the Conservancy and others, has been working for the past year to save our water and our Everglades from new oil drilling and fracking. We're still celebrating the news that Dan A. Hughes has abandoned all plans to explore for oil. In a mutual agreement, Hughes and Collier Resources terminated their 115,000-acre oil exploration lease. Most significantly, Hughes withdrew its Golden Gate permit that placed over 30 families in an emergency evacuation zone. This is a milestone victory. Shortly thereafter, the DEP shut down Dan A. Hughes permanently in Florida by revoking the company's remaining permits and filing a lawsuit for remediation. This means 115,000 acres in the heart of the Everglades, only 1,000 feet from homes, has been saved from irresponsible drilling and fracking. A victory like this doesn't happen often, and so we'd like to share our story. You might not know it, but Florida is in the midst of an oil boom, with companies gearing up to tap a gold mine in the Everglades. Last May, Dan A. Hughes from Texas applied for permits to drill for oil only 1,000 feet from homes. It was part of a huge project to drill 115,000 acres in the Everglades. Residents first learned about the proposed drill site when they received a letter asking them for contact information so they could be evacuated in case of an explosion, gas leak, or other drilling disaster. Alarmed, hundreds of people packed an informational meeting expressing fear and outrage about the proposed drilling. Right away, we learned 2 things. First, we were up against Florida's strong laws protecting the oil and gas industry. And second, there was no time to waste. We met with everyone, from Collier Resources to legislators to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, as well as organized a series of non-stop public actions, from town hall meetings to street corner pickets to candlelight vigils to a march by land and by sea on Governor Rick Scott's beachfront home, to a house party for Senator Dwight Bullard, who sent an official letter requesting DEP deny the permit. We promoted letter writing campaigns that overwhelmed the DEP in 600 public comments and buried the EPA in 125,000 comments. As a result, both agencies traveled to Naples to meet with the public. The EPA hearing was filled with fire marshals closing the doors and overflow spilling into the street. It was a heated 4-hour hearing. When the state issued the Golden Gate permit, 3 petitions challenged it. When the Big Cypress Committee reconvened for the first time in decades, the expert panel recommended denying the permit since they could not guarantee the safety of our water. This brings us to the breaking news about Dan A. Hughes being fined $25,000 for unlawfully fracking the well next to Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, a 5,000-year-old forest with the last remaining old-growth cypress in the world. The violation was grave. The fracking-like incident was not a mistake or oversight, but intentional. The DEP told Hughes not to do a procedure that had never been done before in Florida. They ignored the state and went ahead with what sounds like acid fracking. When ordered to cease and desist, Hughes continued in direct defiance. Imagine our anger that a Texas oil company could disregard the rules and engage in unlawful and untested acid fracking in our vital watershed, either hoping they wouldn't get caught on the one hand or willing to pay the small fee on the other. Worse yet, the DEP was on site at the time of the illegal fracking to observe but not stop the violation because the inspector, quote, did not have enforcement powers. We find it beyond belief that DEP photographed the cancer-causing chemicals but failed to stop the violation, failed to notify the county, and failed to test the water. Armed with documented evidence of the oil company's criminal wrongdoing and the DEP's negligence, we filled the county commission meeting. We argued that Hughes' permit should be revoked because no amount of regulation will make drilling safe if the company won't obey the rules. The commissioners agreed. Like us, they were angry and alarmed that Hughes lied about their intentions to frack and that the DEP kept secret the company's criminal wrongdoing for months during all the key federal and state hearings. The good news is that for the first time ever, the county planned to challenge the state on oil drilling. The commissioners voted unanimously to petition the state to revoke the permit and implement stronger protections. Echoing the commissioners' concerns, United States Senator Bill Nelson ordered a federal investigation of Dan A. Hughes. He wrote, I quote, "We cannot tolerate expanded industrial drilling activities that pose a threat to the drinking and surface water so close to the Florida Everglades, one of the world's great environmental treasures." Soon after the senator's rebuke, the state suspended all new oil operations by Hughes. Meanwhile, the DEP was pressuring the commissioners to accept private settlement rather than pursue a public lawsuit. So we repeatedly returned to the boardroom, calling for the commissioners to submit the challenge, stay the course, include stronger enforcement terms, and file an amended petition, all of which they did. The commissioners' lawsuit woke the DEP from their complacency. After 6 months of suppressing information, the DEP broke silence and issued a flood of memos, press releases, and letters. Secretary Vineyard came to town, and we even got a place at the table with Senator Bill Nelson. At the same time, Dan A. Hughes was encountering increasing opposition, beset by state penalties, a federal EPA investigation, a Section 7 under the Endangered Species Act, a lawsuit from the commissioners with the Conservancy signing on as interveners, relentless protests from residents and activists, and close scrutiny from local and national media like Reuters, Associated Press, Truth Out, News Out, Newsweek, Al Jazeera, Russian Times, CBS, NPR, PNN, Tampa Tribune, the Orlando Sentinel, Fox 4, NBC2, as well as the Naples Daily News and News Press, and a host of others. Dan A. Hughes announced it was ending all oil exploration in Southwest Florida. In a mutual agreement, Hughes Hughes and Collier Resources terminated their 115,000-acre oil exploration lease. Shortly thereafter, the DEP revoked all of Hughes's remaining permits and filed a lawsuit for remediation. Although we're still celebrating the shutdown of Dan A. Hughes, we're now more aware than ever of how much remains to be done, especially because Hughes is now considering challenging the revocation of the one Hogan permit that is in production, or was in production. We remain concerned about the expansion of new Everglades oil drilling, especially the threat it poses to Florida's waters. Maps and permits show that industry is planning to drill in vital watersheds and crucial headwaters in the greater Everglades ecosystem. This is not vacant land, and it's certainly not industrial land. This land is in the heart of the Everglades, in the midst of the massive 30-year Everglades restoration project, a joint federal and state effort that will protect some 2.4 million acres of interconnected wetlands. It doesn't get any bigger. These areas are critical habitat for more than 60 threatened and endangered species, such as the indigo snake, the red-cockaded woodpecker, the wood stork, and Florida panther. These areas are also vital watersheds that replenish levels in the Big Cypress National Preserve and the Everglades National Park, and fill the aquifers millions rely on for drinking water. Even a minor spill here would be catastrophic. It is irresponsible to risk contaminating important wetlands and our fresh water. They're far more valuable than oil. Our point is that this new type of extreme drilling that uses horizontal directional drilling, acidizing, and if needed, fracking, and destroys 5 billion gallons of water per month per well, is not safe. Not here. Florida is still suffering from the worst oil disaster on record, the BP Gulf oil spill. We know accidents happen. Over time, pipes leak, injected fluids surface, and even cement casings fail, as mechanical integrity tests show again and again and again. Because it only takes one incident to ruin a community's aquifer, drilling is not in the public interest. Imagine, too, the environmental degradation and habitat fragmentation generated by a large-scale industrial drill site with its access roads, limestone pads, continuously running diesel generators, 145-foot oil derrick, and heavy trucks hauling in 15,000 feet of pipe and other infrastructure. The state tells us that once the drilling permit is issued, industry is free to extract oil any way they'd like. They can acidize or hydraulically frack any time, and they don't have to tell us. They don't even have to submit a new permit application, because extreme extraction is a workover procedure in Florida. Imagine our alarm when we found out that the oil industry could use trade secret chemicals in unknown concentrations, and that one well could use 11,000 gallons of chemicals, everything from benzene, a known carcinogen, to hydrochloric acid, a corrosive that eats bone, steel, and rock. The oil industry may also inject wastewater that contains heavy metals and radioactive materials that no amount of regulation can ever make safe. It's legal because a loophole redefined all material from oil and gas drilling as non-hazardous, no matter how dangerous it is. It is precisely because these contaminants are so toxic that they have to be injected over 2,000 feet into the boulder zone, which is not containing them as securely as industry claims. EPA records show that the Boulder Zone lacks a competent confining zone, especially in Florida's highly fractured limestone geology, and that injected fluids migrate and surface, especially in Florida's hundreds of improperly plugged wells from the 1940s. EPA records also show that injection wells repeatedly fail, sending toxic chemicals gurgling to the surface or seeping into aquifers that store drinking water. In scores of cases where injection wells had polluted aquifers, most could not be reclaimed, meaning you can't clean up an aquifer. And finally, one well is permitted to destroy 5 million gallons of water per month. And unlike agricultural water, that drilling water can never be reused. It is permanently polluted. Given the worldwide water scarcity and the annual water restrictions in South Florida, it is criminal to permit the oil and gas industry to destroy so much fresh water. Imagine thousands of wells on the 350,000 acres Collier Resources just leased for seismic testing. And even more if Collier leases all of its 800,000 acres of mineral rights. Just as the pumping of aquifers in Florida has dried up springs, so too the oil industry's pumping of our aquifer threatens to dry up nearby wells and wetlands. If we add in climate change and sea level rise, the case is closed. We need to shut the floodgate on new Everglades oil drilling. So if we wanted to draw a point from all this, it might be that our water and our Everglades are far more valuable than oil. They're our lifeblood, fueling everything from agriculture to our multi-billion-dollar tourist industry. We need to protect them. To conclude, we're asking everyone to stop new Everglades oil by 1, speaking out, 2, joining our Facebook group, Stone Crab Alliance, 3, endorsing a local and state ban on extreme extraction, and 4, bringing your troubled water to the March on the Governor's Beachfront Home by Land and by Sea, October 18th in Naples. We want clean water, not dirty drilling. And this next event will just draw attention to a broad range of threats to clean water faced by communities throughout Florida. Thank you very much. Bring your water, bring your voices.
So it simply a point Pugisiachin, Ayo Kisabtastic, Talenham Party bill, the Pugin is a little bit to a little bit in system and Atanas Magic, Simon Basic, one touch of Matroa, Yaya, simply Hamoya, Calgary County, Yoli Hontia, Minati, what's on a hack is a Hunchmanga. My atas mo Yoli Tomate was starting March that I October 18 Mondoa. Oil drilling, so mental and game was not going to
All right, good stuff.
So I want to thank Karen Dwyer for that, and Jennifer Hager is going to be up next. But just to keep in mind, there's a question that I know that some people in my community have with regards to this operations. And maybe after your presentation, Jennifer, maybe you can address it if you have this information or not. Karen was talking about drilling on private property. Is that so? What we're concerned with is there access to drilling on public property, that sort of thing. So maybe after your presentation, touch on that a little, because I know that was something that somebody in my family was concerned about. Thank you.
Up next, we have Jennifer Hecker, who is the Director of Natural Resources Policy for the Conservancy of Southwest Florida.
Well, first, I just want to thank the Miccosukee Tribe and Houston for inviting us to present today. We really appreciate this opportunity. Love the Everglades movement. I'm sorry. Love the Everglades movement and the sponsor. I'm the Director of Natural Resource Policy for the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, and just very quickly, a little bit about our organization. We were founded in 1964. Our headquarters is in Naples, Florida, and we represent Collier, Lee, Charlotte, Glades, and Hendry counties. We are separate and distinct from the Nature Conservancy. We have a Wildlife Rehabilitation Hospital and Nature Center that's at our headquarters campus in Naples, an environmental education team, and an environmental policy team. So roughly about 55 staff total in our organization, and I oversee our natural resource policy. I just wanted to, before I begin, mention that we work on all different types of issues, from listed species to Everglades issues. Also, we work on growth management, transportation. We work on a variety of water policy issues, and the Caloosahatchee being one of them. We were one of the organizations that nominated the Caloosahatchee back in 2006, and it was selected as one of the 10 most endangered rivers in the United States 8 years ago. And we still fight for it today, year after year, trying to get the appropriate amount of water and the cleanliness of water needed for that system. And this morning we heard excellent presentations from Jesse and Laura Reynolds, about other systems around our state. Really, we suffer from the same exact issues over on the West Coast with a lot of our major rivers and estuaries. So we're really all united with you all in trying to solve this problem holistically and make sure that we don't sacrifice another natural system in fixing our own. So with that, I was asked to present on oil, and I just wanted to continue the discussion here. I was trying not to be redundant with Karen's presentation, but we are experiencing somewhat of a South Florida oil rush, if you will. And from our perspective, we wanted to kind of give you a little bit of the background as to why we have the concerns we do as an organization with what's going on now. Florida has a very unique hydrology and geology. As you know, we sit on very porous lime rock. We have interconnected aquifer systems that are also connected with our surface waters. And so, we feel that we're in a particularly fragile environment, and we need to be very sensitive in the way that we develop. We have other activities like mining, and we're very concerned about expansion of oil drilling because of this unique hydrology and geology we have here. Well, there has been oil drilling for many numbers of years in Florida. 1943 was the discovery of the Sunnyland oil field under Southwest Florida. You can see up on this graphic that the Sunnyland sits in Southwest Florida under several counties. And it has been tapped into. We've had small-scale production since the late 40s with 162 wells operating, a lot of them in South Florida in Collier, Hendry, Lee, and Dade counties. But this drilling was very different than the drilling that we're seeing today. It was vertical drilling, more traditional oil drilling, and we have concerns with the newer technologies that are now being pursued. I would point out that on the whole, Florida produces only 1/10 of 1% of domestic oil production. So when you talk to your friends about energy independence, it's important for them to keep it in context. And the bottom line is the juice worth the squeeze? We produce so little oil. It's a very poor grade oil called heavy sour oil. Isn't able to be refined into gasoline. So this really isn't about energy independence, and we want to educate our decision makers about that because often that is the argument we hear. So really what we're dealing with is that when you go down to the oil reserves, you're going through all the aquifers that the public uses for its water supplies. And Collier County, we rely on the superficial aquifer, but we also rely on some of the brackish aquifers as well that go down more than 900 feet underground. So when we're drilling, we're actually drilling down through these different layers. And that's when it becomes very important to look at the casement of these wells and make sure that we're not compromising our water supplies and where and how we're drilling. We're seeing a huge upsurge in permit requests in Southwest Florida. It's a confluence of market forces and new technologies. These new technologies like horizontal drilling can double or triple yields out of the same wells. So with that enhanced production, combined with the price of oil, we're seeing now a renewed interest in going in after these very poor, limited reserves in Southwest Florida. In the past 5 years, we've had DEP staff say that they've received more permits than all the history of DEP, and in the last year, more than the prior 10 years. So we're seeing a lot of applications, 39 drilling applications in our region, 37 have been granted, only 2 were not granted. Those were either incomplete or withdrawn. So the permitting usually is 30 to 60 days. At most, the permitting agency at the state level only has 90 days to review and approve or deny a permit application. Modern drilling, it's very important to understand that we're not just talking about the drill wells themselves. There's actually usually 3 wells to every well. There's a water supply well that takes potable water, usually from our prime aquifer, our superficial aquifer, which is the cheapest, best water for public use and allows it to be used for industrial purposes. That water supply well can have impacts on neighboring wetlands if it's drawing from the superficial aquifer, or also on private well users who live nearby who rely on private wells. We also then have, of course, the actual drilling well, and then the wastewater injection well, which this was mentioned before. And again, because you're going through these different aquifer layers that are used for public supply, the concern is that if there's high pressure injection, like what was used at Hogan, then you could compromise the casement and cause it to leak and contaminate aquifers that we rely on for public use. So a Class 2 injection well, these are wastewater injection wells. Because this wastewater is so toxic, as Karen mentioned, it can't be recycled or reused, it has to be disposed of. These injection wells inject it very deep underground. They often contain very toxic metals, radioactive substances, benzene, lead, arsenic. Very small amounts of these substances could be very toxic to human health. The regulations really favor the oil industry at the federal level. There's numerous federal loopholes where oil and gas is exempted from most of our major environmental federal laws. And this is just an example that when wastes are generated from these wells, generally these wastes, if they were generated as a result of any other industry, would be considered hazardous waste and have to go in a Class 1 well that would be inspected every 12 months, and there would be a 2-mile radius of inspection around the well. But because they're oil and gas, they get to go in what's known as a Class 2 well, which only is inspected every 5 years and only 400 yards around the well. So it's much less stringently regulated, even though it's the same exact type of chemical composition as other waste from other industries where it would be handled as more hazardous waste. On the state level, we have very minimal antiquated laws and regulations on oils and gas, and none of those laws address newer technologies like fracking. So unfortunately, it's not illegal to frack because there's no laws whatsoever on it now in the state of Florida. Where is the wastewater being injected? It's being injected into the boulder zone. The boulder zone is actually sitting down here in the lower Florida end. We actually use the upper Florida end for drinking water over in Collier County. And the boulder zone is thought to be a place where you could safely put it and no one would ever see it again, but the USGS has looked at the boulder zone and determined that they believe it comes out the side of Florida into the Atlantic Ocean. So we don't get earthquakes like you do in other parts of the country where they inject wastewater because it destabilizes the geology. Our rock is so porous that it's just seeping out sideways. So you don't get that pressure buildup that would create an earthquake. But the inverse problem is then it's just leaking out. So one important thing to realize, and this is really to speak to what you brought up, Houston, is that mineral rights are separate than surface rights. We have a lot of areas in Collier County which are public lands or private lands that are not owned by Collier Resources or other companies that control mineral rights in our county. So they're allowed to drill through these lands that they don't own to access the oil reserves underneath, and that's creating a lot of problems. Right here, this is a graphic of what Dan A. Hughes had leased from the Collier Resource Company. This is over 100,000 acres of land, and it includes areas under the Fakahatchee, the Picayune, the Corso Swamp Sanctuary, the Corso Regional Ecosystem Watershed lands. They had leased all of these yellow squares of land, sections of land, for potential drilling. Then proposed drilling often occurs in inappropriate locations. So really what we want to make sure is that we're not drilling in inappropriate locations or by inappropriate methods. Inappropriate locations, we have a lot of proposed drilling being proposed very close to residential homes, in endangered species habitat, prime aquifer recharge areas, or near sensitive wetland or flowway areas, or in public conservation lands. This was the proposed Golden Gate Hughes well that was right near residences. All those peach dots are panther telemetry. This is the Florida Panther National Wildlife Preserve right here outlined in black. So you can see that this well would have been in areas that are being heavily utilized by the endangered Florida panther. This is to address inappropriate methods. Again, we just talked about some of those methods. Acid fracking uses acid, hydrochloric acid, which is designed to dissolve lime rock. Chemicals, including carcinogenic chemicals, and water at very high pressure to blast open the lime rock. So it's to forcibly extract oil. It's not like the old-fashioned where you stick the straw in and the oil comes like a fountain out the top. We don't have that situation in Florida. Our oil isn't under pressure. They're having to go in and forcibly extract it and then pump it out of the ground to pull it. And these more forcible techniques have a lot of additional risk. We also have seismic exploration, which means where they go in and try to locate where the reserves are. And they're involving techniques such as setting 4 explosives underground. There's one proposal where they're going to set 8,800 charges of explosives 50 to 200 feet across 103,000 acres of land in Southwest Florida. So they're just large-scale oil exploration and production proposals moving through permitting right now. This map is to show you that hundreds of thousands of acres are currently being explored for exploration. All the crosshatched areas are areas that either recently were permitted or are currently being permitted for oil exploration. And you can see the green down here is in the Big Cypress National Preserve. That whole area, 230,000 acres of land in the Big Cypress, is being currently permitted for seismic exploration for expanded oil. So just very quickly, the preserve, when it was, 2 minutes? When the preserve was created, the Colliers sold the land to the federal government, but they did not sell the mineral rights. It was understood that at the time of the creation of the preserve that there would be protection of the preserve, the natural and ecological integrity, while allowing reasonable use and enjoyment of privately owned oil and gas interests. So really the conundrum is how do we balance these two things and what exactly is reasonable use? What techniques and locations are reasonable while being able to still maintain that natural and ecological integrity that the federal government paid for when buying those lands. This currently is in permit review at both the state and federal level. Very quickly, the Conservancy, I just wanted to mention, what we've been trying to do is track all of the permits associated for each project in Southwest Florida and put in extensive technical comment letters on all of them. So that has taken an enormous amount of resources. We've actually hired additional staffing to help us do this, and as well as some experts. We've sent in action alerts out to garner public attention, provided public testimony, done media interviews. We've been lobbying the county commissioners, federal leaders, state legislators. We've been collaborating with other groups such as the Stone Crab Alliance, Preserve Our Paradise, and other groups that are working on this issue in our area. On the Hogan fracking violation, while we've had some positive movement, as Karen outlined, unfortunately Friday, the Hughes Company announced that they actually have not given up the idea of continued production at the Hogan well. And as a result, we anticipate there's going to be ongoing litigation. We right now are a legal intervener on behalf of Collier County against the state, and the state is suing the Dan A. Hughes Company. So we have all these different people in litigation trying to sort through DEP's ineffective regulatory oversight and enforcement against Dan A. Hughes, and also against Dan A. Hughes to do proper remediation for what they've undertaken at that well site. We still need, I'm sorry, I'm just wrapping up. This is the second last slide. Permit revoked. We still need meaningful surface and groundwater assessment. The people are swimming, bathing, drinking this water. It's never been tested. It's been more than 6 months since these chemicals were injected underground. Also, we need proper plugging and abandonment. Final slide is that the next steps in general is we need to close federal loopholes to have oil and gas adhere to federal environmental laws. We need to create local land use policies that require conditional use permits when the exploratory wells are being proposed to address compatibility issues with neighborhoods. And we need to introduce new state legislation to create legal framework for more meaningful permitting requirements for future oil and gas activities in our state, requiring them to use alternative water supplies, to have approval by state agencies before undertaking any workover or changes to their permits, leaving buffers around homes, avoiding impacts to endangered species, properly treating and disposing wastewater. I did want to mention that the Hughes company, when they fracked that well, they trucked the wastewater over here to Miami. And we've been looking into that, and we have reason to believe that they might have been properly treated and disposed of that over here in Miami. So this isn't just a Southwest Florida area issue. That toxic fluid was actually brought over here and disposed of over here in a way that might be putting this community at risk as well. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Ya siyempre ako yung panumaya istas kit isi to gini si siyo. Yang nen hampa siyo. Mama na sana ska siyo ni tuntua. Ano extension able sana ska siyo ni tuntua. I want to thank everybody for their patience. I know that we just had a nice, big, beautiful lunch and it's kind of like taxing our energy. So you guys are troopers. Thank you. And so I also want to ask the patience of our speakers. We're going to have to kind of cut short time for the remaining speakers. So just asking for your patience. Just to give you all a heads up, I want to thank the people who are helping us out with the airboat ride. I want to thank Tiger Tails Airboat Tours. I also want to thank Buffalo Tigers Airboat Tours. Let's give them a hand. And there's going to be a couple of people that are a little bit going to be left out today because of some personal issues that we're having with the people that are providing the airboat ride. We have had to cut back on 2 boats. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to take some people off the list that's going to be on the airboat ride. But this is something that we do throughout the year. So please stay connected with us, stay in touch with us. We do offer these airboat excursions as an educational experience. This is not tourism. We need your help to get this message out there. So I'm just letting you guys know that I'm going to have to take a few people off of the list. But I do thank Buffalo Tigers Airboat Tours and the Tiger Tail Airboat Tours for their support. Thank you.
All right, up next we have our guest speaker, Cesar Becerra. He has been loving the Glades ever since he was on a Boy Scout trip, and he's also the past publisher of the Everglades magazine, as well as the author of a seminal study on the logging history of the Everglades. So please welcome onto our stage here, Cesar Becerra.
No problem. I'll roll with whatever. I got a great heading, and what I mean by that is really positive heading. Because as a historian, I'm looking at these stories, these images, and I have kind of a foresight to look at things and say, man, 100 years ago from now, this is going to be really important. So thanks for giving me a great heading. I wear a lot of hats, and one of the biggest hats I wear right now is with FIU. I'm a consultant, and I help them develop and expand their Everglades collection. So online, you could literally spend the rest of your life at everglades.fiu.edu. Okay? Our Everglades Digital Library is vast, it's limitless, and though even with that, we have a lot more to put in there. Recently, we had a huge donation from Everglades National Park, literally 13 pallets of books, close to about 6,000 books, reports, etc. And it was my job to sift through all that and to kind of cherry pick the ones that we needed, because sometimes there were 4 or 5 different identical copies. It's massive. One of the fascinating things about Everglades is that no matter how long I live or any of you all live, even combined, we'll never get to knowing everything. There's so many angles to the story, which is a good thing, and the part that gives me a little headache. But I'm going to give you a little brief overview of some interesting things that you may or may not know. I'm going to read something that's going to simultaneously depress you and also lift your spirits up really, really high.
Because in talking about the Everglades, there's no way you can ignore a document that came from the legislature of Florida in 1848. If you were to really begin the story of the Glades, you must hear the words that were spoken. It was a resolution that was considered, and it went like this: whereas large tracts of the public lands lying in the vicinity of Lake Okeechobee and in that region south of said lake called the Everglades, being covered with water, are incapable of being surveyed and subdivided, and are therefore valueless to the United States of America. Now it's depressing and it's uplifting because, as you've heard today, the pendulum has swung really far the other way, which is a great thing. But you have to know that, as a historian, I come across documents and documents and documents where there was a whole different attitude at one point in time, where we the people, progress meant destroying the Glades at all costs, because we didn't know to understand them. Well, we sort of said we didn't understand them. The slide that I put up here is a case in point in this. Because a lot of times when we go down these paths of restoration, we say, well, you know what? We didn't know it till now. We didn't know it till 20 years ago. Well, that's Harry Truman in Everglades City. By the way, the park is dedicated on an airport runway at Everglades City. And his words were very, very poetic. Here, there are no peaks, no mountains protruding up into the sky. Instead, there are vast and lonely distances, intricate and monotonous waterways. Nothing of the things that we are used to in our national parks. Now, interestingly enough, that particular moment in that speech was lifted from a report in 1938. He's speaking in 1947, but verbatim from a report that was so negative and so horrible that the park itself should have never even been opened. They were written by the first superintendent of the park, Daniel Beard, who was sent by the Department of Interior to investigate this idea of opening a national park. And he said in his report in 1938 that if the National Park Service was prepared to put 50 to 100 years of restoration beginning right then and there in 1938, then the Everglades as a national park seems justifiable. But if it's not ready to do so, the park and the ecosystem is not justified. In other words, we unfortunately wasted a lot of time. When the park was open, there was this kind of view that, well, there it is. Set up the boundaries, put up the ticket booth, and enjoy. Well, we didn't really come out of the true nature of the time that we kind of wasted until the 70s, until we were staring at the big jet port that was really about to devastate it all. And we realized, whoa, we need to do more. There's a bigger system than just the park. But that's false too, because there were certain founding fathers of the park that knew if we didn't get it all, we'd be in trouble. Ernest Coe, the founding father of the movement to preserve and get the park rolling, actually stepped down because he saw that politically and economically we were being really, really weak. He knew that we would be in trouble if we didn't get those lands south of the Lake Okeechobee, etc. And he literally was so disgusted he stepped off. But we can't say we didn't understand. We had a lot. In fact, we had stuff even before that we knew. We can go to the next slide. This group of women is one of my favorite stories, and this is why my very, very brief talk is called The Park Before the Park. Before there was an Everglades National Park, there was a small, tiny park so integrally important to the story of even beginning Everglades National Park. And remember, I really look at the park as the beginning of a foothold in a bigger, environmental story. And I will tell you this, there were 4 big occasions historically that almost killed the entire ecosystem, even before Henry Flagler's time. Okay, so even before we get to Flagler and the train coming down and everybody coming down to Florida en masse, there were 4 big occasions that didn't happen, luckily, that could have killed the park. But these women right here, these are from the Florida Federation Women's Club. And Henry Flagler decided early on that he wanted to build a big port at the end of Florida, in particular Cape Sable. He sent a gentleman whose namesake is just feet away from where you're sitting. A lot of you guys probably know Chrome Avenue. You probably drove here. It's literally, we can pop open a window, we can see it. But William J. Chrome, after Henry Flagler sent him out into the Everglades to survey a road to the end of Florida, turned to Mr. Flagler after 2 months, mosquito-ridden, clothes torn. He marched right up to Flagler and said, Mr. Flagler, there's no amount of fill on God's green earth to bring your railroad to Cape Sable. Had he not said that, in fact, those very words were any weaker than that, Flagler was the type of guy that said, you know what, I don't care, we're going anyway. But he said it just right, because he knew Flagler was the type of guy, if he didn't deliver bad news properly, he'd send you back to the drawing board. The key point of this is Flagler abandons his plan to go to Cape Sable to build his deep water port. He had actually no interest to go to Key West originally. Key West came later because he had to go to Key West. He couldn't go through the Everglades. But if he had, the Glades would have been destroyed. Flagler's modus operandi is every 10 miles, there would have been a town, there would have been development, there would have been farms, etc., all the way down to Cape Sable. He could have forgotten that. So we have an unsung hero in the very words which probably were uttered in 30 seconds time by William Chrome. One of the properties that Flagler bought, though, before Chrome went out there, because he was very, very superstitious that once word got out he was heading that way for any reason, the land prices would boom. He bought a small 2,000-acre hammock called Paradise Key. And the Women's Club of Federation members later on rallied to protect. Luckily, Miss Flagler, the widow Flagler, was a member of the Florida Federation. So she was instrumental in donating that land. That became the nucleus of the park movement. In fact, on the day one, when Truman is up on that stage, the only true lands handed over on that moment in time, everything else would come later, was the deed to the property of Royal Palm State Park. So that's a very, very important little side note to our story, the park before the park. I have some images here. Just go on to the next one. Since my time is short, I'll tell you, every year one of my pleasures in life is to go and be Henry Flagler, albeit very shorter and very younger Henry Flagler. But I portray him because his story has so many different angles, and I portray other different people in the story, a logger in the Everglades, an early environmentalist, etc. And one of my big passions as I work for Nature's Classroom is to educate kids. In fact, one of the things that we need to do is make sure that the young people, our future, get really not just educated about the Everglades, but in the table next door, FIU's little table that we set up there, we have some flyers of a tour that we put together, a very important tour that's 4 days, each little different section. And this tour does give off important historical and ecological tidbits, etc., and foundations, but more importantly, the tour is designed to make kids, not make, but to have them enjoy the beauty that is around them and the speciality of what's around us, okay? Because we believe that we have to first kind of excite them. Later on, we'll get into the nitty-gritty. So, thank you so much. Thank you, Houston. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. All right. Okay, we have a quick 15-minute break. Get up, stretch, get some coffee, wake up, and then come back in 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, you know the lighting. Something. I'm sure during editing, they some of them I put salad to the
Going for a next year. Jared, can you call Lloyd Borodeski? See where he's at? Thank you. September 2013, this part is really cool. He was awarded a month-long area residency over here at Everglades National Park. Now, for more about his work, you're going to check out his website. It's really awesome. subtropics.org/Gustavo Matamoros. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm a little overwhelmed by all the activism, and I wish I was involved with that. My work, my work keeps me busy too. But it is about perhaps something that can add. I hope my presentation adds in one way or another to this conversation. Anyway, in order for me to, my presentation is less informational than hopefully experiential. I try to basically bring into this my experience of the Everglades. I've lived in Miami since 1979, but I confess that my relationship with the Everglades wasn't that very strong until last year. I went there for a month and learned more about it. Not in the way that you guys presented, but in the way that I'm going to try to portray with this. I work with sound in order to try to understand things better myself, and hopefully the work that I do helps others. Kind of hint us to how to, utilize sound.
You're Andrea. Where's Alex and Albert?
I'm going to try to begin by giving you. I'm going to
Cool, thank you. You guys are confirmed.
And then it's basically about the idea of what sound means to me. It's an old piece from 1994. Okay, in this video, you can actually see how change and transformation are manifested both visually and in sound, and how sound is also audible description of what just happened, right? So the other thing you can do is perhaps understand that visual information alone is not the whole picture. In the case of this particular thing, as soon as the flame is extinguished, there's something else happening which we can't see, but we can certainly hear it. And that's basically the sound that we hear from the perspective of the match. In other words, the match is amplified itself, and we hear what the match would be hearing if it was burning. And so as the flame goes off, the wood cools off, and the crackling we hear is that of the match. I'm talking about sound first in order to basically give you a sense of how I think about it. So there's three things that we can hear in the sound. The content-based aspects of the sound are what allows us to utilize it as language. So my words are simply content. You receive the semantic information and perhaps throw out the words themselves. The sound signature is the quality of my voice, for instance, right? What makes a sound unique, or the sound source. It's the characteristics of the sound source. And then in the sound we also hear the environment. We hear where the sound source might be located. If it's on the right or the left, if it's far away or close by, if it's inside or outside. All this information is actually heard in the sound. Every sound we hear this information. I'm going to stop, because the talk is brief, I'm going to concentrate on the content part. There's all these things I can say about environment and all that. In this case, I'm going to play you a bird song that I recorded also in the Everglades, not in September, a little bit before. It sounds like this. And I'm talking about the forward sound. Okay, I don't know what the bird is, but it's quite, it's talking about something. It's very animated about it. I'm going to play you the same recording, only slowed down an octave. So it'd be half the speed. I can almost sing that myself, right? Okay, so in other words, what happens is, an octave down, now these sounds are more like, they're down to our level, they're more in our range. It's possible for us to not just hear them, but also maybe mimic them and all that. It's easier for us to then make a relationship with these sounds. In other words, we're not birds, we're humans, So technology, in my case, helps me kind of understand better sounds that are not within my range. And the other thing that you can notice is that these sounds now become more like words. I don't know the language, but I can actually speak, right? So I'm going to show you a piece that I made utilizing this kind of idea. It's basically trying to do the same thing that the bird is doing, except using recorded sounds. With a composer that's actually gotten to be quite well known in the scientific community because of his work with barbecues. His name is David Dunn. He invented a microphone that you can see there. It's called an insertion mic. You can use it to listen to bark beetles inside the trees. As a matter of fact, he made the first recording ever of bark beetles outside the lab. And here's a recording. Here's that recording. It turns out that bark beetles have a tremendously intricate social interaction through sound. And he's figuring out ways to mitigate the bark beetle problem by utilizing sound devices rather than pesticides. And in collaboration with scientists. Now, these are sounds that we would normally not hear, except through the aid of microphones. They're very small sounds. I'll move on because there are very little time. I'm going to show you some sounds that I recorded during my residency in the Everglades in September. Here's first one. This is what we call a bridge to nowhere in the park. These are recorded. I didn't make this during the day. I made this at night. Because 2 weeks into the residency, I realized that the park was so flooded that the wildlife was spread out, and I didn't have a boat or anything like that, so I couldn't go after it. So, but then, then I discovered that at night was the best time to record. Is this loud enough? I'm going to jump to the next one. This is an owl at 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, it'll take a while if I play the whole thing. This next one is sound anthropophonic sound, which is basically the sound of the plane going by. I'll jump to another one. Here's the area of Long Pine Key. Also around maybe between 6 in the afternoon and 9 o'clock. I was actually trying to capture bats right here. And I'll jump. This is some more of the sounds. I only have 2 more minutes, so I'm rushing through this. So there's all kinds of amphibians at night. Here's another, lots of insects. And more amphibians. Okay, so I hear some birds in the morning. I think there are youngsters. Very nice. Anyway, so here's something that we might do, that instead of trying to imitate the sounds themselves, in other words, we don't try to recreate the sounds electronically, but we try to generate electronic sounds that tend to behave the way that one likes to. I have sounds of bats and things like that I can share with you, but if you go to my website, you will probably hear some of these sounds. Thank you very much.
Gustavo Montemoros does some amazing work with regards to sound art, installations, experimental, a studio over on South Beach on Lincoln Road where you can have like listening sessions and learn more about his work and sound theory and all of that. Yai hemang donge chapo Malaysia. Ponoy pikesando kaya leolito gita pumoy che tole ma dia option ni tumonte. Mine is Ginotaje or option ni tumonte. Yai hemang donge chia. There was one section David done in the team men hantenchik it's kanadia suas nintro was hantenchik listo agata kita imongetik mahalis akbi joli tumto men hantenchik listo agata joli to mame yai hementen antimos timongetan alexino. So just explaining a little bit about some of the context of the work. There's some applications with regards to saving certain trees out there that's important to Miccosukee. So that's why I wanted to come and have him share some of his work and kind of let you hear how he's using sound to do that.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next speaker is Michael Frank. And Michael Frank is from the Otter Clan of the Miccosukee Tribe of Everglades in Florida. He maintains on a daily basis numerous traditional villages and gardens located on the tree islands surrounding the water conservation area 38.
Okay, I just said thank you for y'all coming out. And I spoke in my language. I guess you must be foreigners, you can't speak my language, right? Okay, thank you very much for coming to talk. I myself, I was born, raised in the Everglades. You see the highway here, about 20 miles out, there's a Miccosukee Reservation, and about 7 miles north from the highway, that's where I was born. called Yanche, it means high island. That's where I was born, 1957. And my grandpa told me out there, you just saw your grandma, your grandpa, your aunt, your uncles, anybody that came by in a dugout canoe, maybe once a year or twice a year, somebody would come by in a noisy metal thing called elbow. So every now and then you see maybe a plane go by. That was it. But my grandpa told me way back then that there are people coming. And they're coming. From the four winds, they will come. What you have here today, he says, enjoy it. As much as you can, because the people, when they come, they will take, and they will take, and they will take, and they will take, until they take your land, your home, your identity, your way of life. And that's what we are today. Because out there in the Everglades, I drank the water, ate the birds, the fish, but can't do it no more. The water is polluted. I can eat the fish or the birds. The last time I ate, maybe mudfish, goldfish, bass, was back in 1981 or 82, so maybe 30 years ago. I even raised my kids, even when I came out to the highway. And my kids wanted something to eat. I didn't have no money. No cheeseburger, no hot dog. I just went to the canal, got a bass or bread, got a bird. I would go kill it there. That's how I raised my kids. I can't do that no more. Because it's the fish, birds. My home, we're talking about my home now, the Everglades. It is polluted, it is destroyed. I can't live off the land no more. What the government tried to do back in the 1800s, under Andrew Jackson, trying to take us out of the Everglades, exterminate us, take us to Oklahoma, destroy your way of life. They have succeeded today. I can't live off the land. I can't drink the water. People ask me, don't you go fishing? You live in the Everglades? Don't you go hunting? I say, for what? That's for the mercury. Fish for the mercury. Even the birds, even the animals. Plus, there ain't that much animals anymore. The last time I killed a deer was back in 78 or 79, back in the late 90s. But that's what I eat. That's how I survived. I ate living off the land in the Everglades. My grandfather, my mom, my uncles. We came out with the last one to come out in the Everglades back in 1962. You go out there in Miccosukee, you said, big old chicky. Behind it, there's a camp. And that's where my grandfather died. He couldn't provide for the family anymore. We have to come on out. We're the last one to leave the Everglades. But my grandpa told my grandma, hey, we live a long good life in the Everglades, like we were told you. But we have no choice. We have to come out in the Everglades because there's no birds, no animals. But when I was young, you could look up in the sky. You couldn't even see the clouds because of the birds migrating in the Everglades. There was plenty of deer. You look outside, you look outside, maybe 1 or 2, 3 deer standing out there. Food all over the place. And that was what? That was our Creator sending food for us to eat. That's how we survived from the soldiers back in the 1800s. That's how we were told to never, ever, ever leave the Everglades. As polluted as it is, as bad as it is, I'm not leaving the Everglades. That's my home. If I leave the Everglades, I can surrender to the government. What Andrew Jackson tried to do back in the 1800s, I would say, hey, you done your job. As bad as it is, I ain't going nowhere. That's my home, that's mine, because that's how we survived back in the 1800s when the soldiers came out. We were told, go out into the Everglades. They said, our God will provide a refuge for you. An island appeared. My ancestors went into the island. The soldiers came by with their horses and cannons. They came by. As long as we were in the islands, they could not see us. That's how we survived. But we were told, eventually down the road, you're going to need that island. You need to take refuge in that island. That's why I'm still in the Everglades, because the battle's not over. My home is being destroyed now, and the battle for my sovereignty, for my home, for my existence, you call it endangered species. I'm one of them. You kill, where I was born, snakes, rats, panthers, rabbits, everywhere. Deers, they've all disappeared. When I was young, like I said, I survived living off of them. But you all have destroyed it. Americans, the government, you all have destroyed it. You all did a good job of destroying my home. And that's why I'm here. I always tell the truth. I'm not here, I'm not up here to play you a violin and say, oh, this is good, that is good. It is bad. It is getting worse, not getting better. I think the EPA standard was passed back in the early 90s. EPA has never met it. On a triangle, about 200 parts per billion, we released into the Everglades, untreated. Holiday Park, Home Avenue, pump station number 9. The most developed place in Broward County, flushing their canals polluted straight into the Everglades. If you go to the Benson Reservation, on the north side of the highway, that canal comes from that station. The Miami Canal that comes out of Lake Okeechobee, still polluted, still coming out. Pump Station 40, you have not met the EPA standards. If you're an American, I'm talking to you. You are destroying my home. You are destroying my life. There's a battle. The battle's not over. As long as I'm alive, I'm going to sing this song to the day I go to the grave, to the Everglades. But it's not over. And just like I said, out there, my uncle and I were told, always stay in the Everglades. You stay in the Everglades, that's how you survive from the soldiers. Your language, your culture, your land will never ever be taken away from you. That's why we're still in the Everglades. People look at us, and me and my uncle, people look at us like, why are they always going out in the Everglades? Why are they building chimneys? Why are they planting corn? There's no profit in that. And then, my children's future is involved in it. Our sovereignty, our land, and our home. As long as we do that, we believe in a God. Our Creator looks down and sees me, my uncle, and my family, and my loved ones in the Everglades, and says, hey, my people was out preserved from the soldiers back in the 1800s. They love me. They're still maintaining their traditional ways. Nobody's going to touch them. But if I leave the Everglades, then I become just like one of you living in Miami or Naples or Big Cypress, in the world living in the Everglades, then my home be taken away. I become just like a regular American, going from state to state, country to country for better life. So no, don't do that. You're not them. I made you. I'll put you here. You came out of the ground here. That's how you're going to survive. And that's how we're fighting for the Everglades every day. And that's why you go back out there on 10 Miami Trail, go about a half a mile, you see a 1 mile skyway bridge. For what? We sued National Park Corps of Engineers because first thing they have to do is clean the water. They're not cleaning it. They don't make EPA standards. They're not going to. They're never going to. Because right now, they're using the water transfer to air tree as like a filter. Hold it. National Park don't want the water. Close the gates and let the transfer air tree be a filter. Close it and then clean it. Let it go into the national park into the bay. What happens when that happens? They close the gates, so the water be 2-3 feet high. The water is about maybe 10-12 feet high sometimes. All your islands are about 2-3 feet underwater. There was one time, a deer floater was in the water. Dead. They did. I told my uncle, drive up there, let's see, somebody shot it, left it. No, that deer drowned. Because the water, the deer's only about 5 feet high. When the water's about 12 feet deep, they can't survive. Now, we have a problem with the EPA. We have a problem with saltwater management, Corps of Engineers. They're not maintaining the water that they should. Like I said, we got a battle. The battle's still on. My people have never signed a peace treaty with the government. We're still at war. But the battle is for peace and for our sovereignty. The flag that we have, the white, black, red, and yellow, that represents healing. When we came up with the Constitution of Ireland back in the early 60s, 62, my uncle's grandfather said, hey, let's put up a flag, but let's do it according to a spiritual healing. I mean, those are medicine, and those are healing colors. And that's why you see this flag, you never see this flag going off the wall. That's what we can't be drafted. That's what we can't put a uniform and go to war at other countries. People ask me, yeah, you're Seminole? I said, I'm not a Seminole. But I got brothers, uncles, cousins, relatives who are Seminoles. They're different from us. There's stuff that they accepted from the government we won't do. Our sovereignty, they've been decreed on Vietnam War, we are not being drafted. We can't. Because how am I going to put a uniform with some sort of war with? Because there's only, 41 people back in 62 when we became a recognized Indian tribe. We're so small anyway. And plus, we're only about 700 now. We're too few. But we are fighting for a home, for a land. But the battle is for peace, and for our sovereignty, and for clean water, and for the future of our home. Shnabia.
Our next speaker is Renee Maniari. As a Miccosukee artist from the Otter Clan of the Miccosukee tribe of Indians of Florida, Renee Maniari is concerned with cultural preservation, environmental protection, and the development of the artistic process. As a fashion designer, Renee presents indigenous visions of beauty at festivals and special events. This is her first film, and it was incorporated as part of her fashion show during the Miccosukee tribe's American Indian Day Festival. Since then, this film has found a life of its own, spreading an environmental message in forms all around the world.
Electricity can only have men. Should not be to ya nine shouldn't hide it, I mean, she might say it of that, woman. I should push got, when now you want solar power, when you want that. When we buy it, the starting boy, that goes to the body, I should point it into the people I and now to my effect, the only chip on the man, you don't want this to that, which I when which I Mama, I'll take inside the house.
And so, just as a way of sharing the essence of Renee's message, is that she's really concerned about the decisions that we make as a community, our use of outdated energy systems, and she recommends that we consider alternative and more sustainable energy sources. And so, this is her first film. Right after the film is done, we're going to have an autograph session with the youngsters in the film, so make sure you get your souvenir afterwards. If there's anybody from the resort, maybe we can adjust the lighting. Frank Allegro, maybe you can find somebody to help us to adjust the lighting. And we're going to go ahead and get started with this film and take the airborne right so you can see for yourself what we're talking about.
Social pengkacaman yang tidak dicanya. Antara lalai dan cina dan ada leckan. Lapang Tadagaji, Guantaskida, Monstida, Iskusia, Itachita, Iskusia. Homa Puti, Yang, Chobiko, Ying Tahacho, Namai, Umpun, Mole, Pushua, Numan, Mantaskida. No. Yeah. Bahagia Minha. Emma Italy, they be or in fact I when I don't go to you are Hachian in Panama Kayo there. You are Hachian in the Taiwan that Odishika. Okay. Olha que ele está muito, está olhando aqui. Olha que ele está. Não. Olha cá.
Yale, ito yung kilajwa yan. At sinibalan na ako na nung ramungan. Ito ulit kahon, ito ulit kahon. Sabay nito ay mga mayaro na lalag kaya si hira yun ito. Si Parsi yun yung mas yale tayo kung sa kiinan. Buwag yung tayo dito. Kung saan yun yung ito. Maya, ilato chale, chimana mo honoria, kanta lo chale, tachine gani, como le hit monta, which is kayo, chubuta, yale chubanda. I go in the only chip, since good and that chip, yale need the yale, the one thing in yard, what on the yard, with the non stage, opposite to the only chip, man, come on. Una chip, party, but not chip, yeah, 18. Una parte cliente, tudo da champion, tudo da champion. Tu chama tá tudo aí no meio. Pé. Se o nazi open, da cliente, se o monato se não vai, já não tem chip. Da na da ascolta. Agora eu vou mostrar uma chip. Aí, que me lá, e o meu sangue se não vai. Sini tak sewa, sini tak kipak sewa. Memayo di saya mungkin semua. Aspirato, ada pak. Itu tua. Tu kemana sudah? Mahato. Tu kemana siapa? Aspir. Kena siapa? Sebar.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. This has been a wonderful day-long activities of information, sharing, building of community, and learning what is important to each other. And so we are proud to be able to finish this symposium with a little bit of Miccosukee priorities and what is Everglades restoration all about from our perspective. And so we have the stars of the film. We're going to have an autograph session out here in the hallway. Make sure you pick up a souvenir. Tomorrow at FIU, the symposium continues. Having gathered this information and inspiration, we're going to put it into action. We're going to have some action planning at FIU at the Green Library in room 220 from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. So spread the word, join us, and for those of you that I had talked to confirming the airport ride, use the restroom now. We have 15 minutes to get ready and to load the shuttles, which are going to be outside of the valet parking area. So ladies and gentlemen, and on behalf of the Coordination Circle of Love the Everglades Movement, thank you very much for attending Summer Symposium 2014. Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool.